And we are back with the fifth and the final segment of the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this final segment, we are going to be talking about the Divisional Round playoff games that are going to be taking place on Saturday. And if we do have enough time, then I can go over the college game that's going to happen on Monday. That we know that is going to be the national championship game for the college football playoffs. So if we do have time, I'll go over that game as well and who I expect to win. So in the first matchup, we have the Chiefs going up against the Texans. The Chiefs, they're going to play their first playoff game at 4:30 on Saturday, January 18th, and I'm going to pick the Chiefs to win in this one. The Chiefs, they're going to play at home. They have the home field advantage throughout the playoffs. And really, there's Patrick Mahomes and home field advantage. That's like a recipe for disaster for every other team, especially a team that is struggling like the Houston Texans are with CJ Stroud. So I think that, well, I've said before that one of the issues that I had with the Texans and their game is primarily their quarterback right now and how he's been playing, and also the lack of a solid run game. Well, actually, it was more so their defense in the last matchup. I wasn't entirely sure whether or not their defense would hold up, but their run game was fine. And it was the quarterback CJ Stroud did throw a bad interception, which against this Chiefs team, I think like since CJ Stroud is struggling a little bit, the Chiefs and their defense, I think they're going to have a really good game plan to sort of slow CJ Stroud down to a point where he's not really doing much for the offense, because he's had several games where he's sort of been a bit of a detriment for the Houston Texans. And I think that might come into effect in this game against the Chiefs, but we'll have to see. I think, the defense from the Chiefs, as well as the lack of offensive play coming from CJ Stroud, is just going to be a really good matchup in favor of the Chiefs in this one, especially since they're going to play at home. It's a very, very difficult environment to play in, and it's like, a Mahomes-led offense isn't necessarily going to give you an easy win when they're playing at home. Like, it's really difficult for them to do that. And the next playoff game that we are going to talk about is the Commanders going up against the Lions. Now, this is also going to be the Lions' first playoff game this year. As we know, they ended up getting the bye week, and they also secure home field advantage throughout the postseason. And their first opponent is going to be the Commanders. As we know, the Commanders, they have won all of their recent games, well, most of their recent games in close margins. I believe that every single one of the games that that they've played ever since they played Chicago on that I believe on October the 27th, ever since they played them and they beat them on the very last play, every single one of the games that they've played in has sort of been down to the wire and down to the very last play. And while I will say that they started out losing a lot of those games, they ended up winning a majority of them by one score, and that was the one score. And a big reason for them winning has been Jaden Daniels. And so I have no doubt that this game is also going to be a rather close game. I think it's going to be one of the closest games of the entire playoffs. I think they're going to go back and forth in the scoring, and there's also an expectation that David Montgomery is going to be back and playing in this one, so that's also bad news for the Commanders, but we'll see how this game goes. Again, this Commanders team is probably it's one of the best Commanders teams in a while. So now they could shape up and they could show everybody that they actually belong in the postseason. I do have the Lions winning in this one, however, because I think that they already have an issue trying to guard Jahmyr Gibbs, and now you just have to imagine him with David Montgomery now and all of the all of the problems that they're going to cause there. Now, the next game on the divisional round is going to be the Rams going up against the Eagles in Philadelphia. Now, obviously, playing in Philadelphia is already difficult as it is, and the Rams, they sort of I won't say that they got lucky, because they were supposed to have home field advantage in the last game, but they ended up playing at a neutral site. And I'm obviously not going to say that affected anything by any means, because, again, the only team that was really given an advantage for playing at a neutral site would have been the Vikings, who wouldn't have had to play in Los Angeles, where there were a bunch of Rams fans. You know what I'm saying? So it's like it only benefited the team that did not have the home wild card. And while I will say it didn't really matter that much, because the Rams ended up making short work of them in that game, I don't think the Eagles are going to go down that easily. Now, I will say that if there was any chance to beat the Eagles, I will say it will be now, because I am not entirely sure if I believe in Jalen Hurts, at least from what he has shown in this postseason. Like, it wasn't like the Eagles won. Like, it felt dominant, but when you look at the scoring, it wasn't like Jalen Hurts was really doing much to help this team win. I mean, he only ended the game with 131 passing yards. Yes, he threw 2 touchdowns, sure, but the lack of passing yards coming in from the Eagles, it has been a problem for a while. A lot of the receivers could be quoted saying that the biggest issue for the Eagles is them in the passing game, which is very uncharacteristic for somebody who is as talented as Jalen Hurts. Yes, I am a Giants fan saying this, but Jalen Hurts, ever since he went to the Super Bowl, and ever since he almost outdueled Patrick Mahomes, well, he did outplay him, but he didn't end up winning that game, but almost beating him and outplaying him in that game, I really, it's stuck for a while. And I really think that with that game, he has incredible talent as being one of the best quarterbacks in this league. But it's not like he's been playing like that ever since, which is why I say, like, now is the best time to beat him, because, again, the last game that he played was it was a pretty bad one. So maybe he will continue with that trend, and that should give you a good chance to capitalize on a lot of mistakes that they end up making. Again, despite all of the turnovers that the Packers were committing and that Jordan Love was committing in this game, again, you have to remember that the Packers against the Eagles ended up throwing 3 interceptions in this one. But I will say, and the fumble at the beginning of the game also costed them as well, but it's not like the Eagles really capitalized much on all of the Packers' interceptions. On the first interception, the Eagles went 3-and-out and punted. On the second interception, the Eagles went 3-and-out again, and they had to punt again. And then on the last interception, which ended the game, think about it, they did not score on the 2 interceptions that would have given them a really good chance to, seal the game right then and there. They did not score on either of them. So, and they could barely only gain 1 yard from that play. So it's not like they're a team. I will say they're not a team that should be taken lightly, but I will also say that they have a lot of their flaws. And then the final game, which is probably the most exciting one, the Ravens going up against the Buffalo Bills. Now, this is obviously a quarterback duel, an MVP showdown, if you will, because both of those quarterbacks are expected to be the final 2 candidates in the running for the MVP. I think Lamar Jackson is going to win the MVP, and I also think that he's going to win in this Bills game. Now, the biggest reason is primarily because the Bills, the only real issue for the Bills, well, not really issue, but like going up against the Bills, is Josh Allen. Once you and the biggest issue that the Bills have is the lack of star power. Now, the Ravens, their biggest issue is their secondary unit on the defensive side, and while I will say that it's going to be, I think it's going to mesh out a little bit evenly, because I think the Ravens, they're going to have really good opportunities to score both in the air and on the ground, and the Bills are going to go up against a mediocre defense, which gives them a chance to make the game a little bit more competitive. Granted, the Ravens, they did beat the Bills in the last matchup that they played in the regular season, I believe, back in September. The Ravens ended up beating them 35-10. So this, granted, they did play in Baltimore, while this game is going to be played in Buffalo, all the way up in upstate New York. So that might be the biggest thing to really overcome in this one, the lack of home field advantage. But still, I'm going to go ahead and pick the Ravens in this one, just because I have faith in Lamar Jackson, and that's more faith that I have in him than Josh Allen. But this is going to be, I think that's going to be the game of the weekend, and probably going to be the best game in a very long time. And it could rival Josh Allen against Patrick Mahomes. It could. And then finally, I did mention that I would go ahead and talk about the college game. So Ohio State, they go up against Notre Dame, and this is going to be a very tough defensive battle. I think that Ohio State is going to be the team that comes out on top, which would be great for Ryan Day, as well as my former teammate Cody Simon. That would be great for him. And I really think it's going to be a dominant defensive battle between two really good teams, and it's going to come down to the very end, as most college championships should. So I'm going to go with Ohio State on this one. That's all that I have, and that's it for this podcast. So thank you so much for tuning into the GSMC Sports Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. As usual, we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show, whether it's a hot take, whether it's a burning question, something you're dying to share. We're all ears. If you really want your comment and or question to get noticed, I recommend using Super Chat or using the link displayed below the ticker, gsmcpodcast.net. Either or really helps the show. That's all that I have today on this podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am your host, Nelson, and as always, take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet. Damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna